My name is Leonie Porter Nocella. I'm a person with MND. I've been diagnosed 6 years, but in hindsight, I've probably had it closer to 20 and attributed the symptoms to anything and everything else, like the increasing breathlessness to pre-existing asthma, falls and lack of balance to knees on the way out, pain to polymyalgia, waking up on the floor bloodied and broken to vasovagal syncope, and the list goes on. The jerking, well, I'm still working on that one, but it's amazing how we can rationalise anything we want to. A note on the asthma MND connection. After a routine bronchoscopy, my respiratory physician found quite severe burns in my trachea. He recommended trying a CPAP, and I haven't looked back. I've had about a 90% reduction in coughing. I use this only at night. In coughing, I've had better sleep, and most importantly, I haven't used prednisolone since, except for a couple of bouts of pneumonia. Now, I don't know if other people experience prednisolone the way I do, but it's not pretty. I feel as though I've run a marathon. My head is always dripping. I experience roid rage. In my case, a sharp and vicious tongue, along with a correspondingly vicious appetite. I'll leave out the biographical notes. But after I retired from my full-time on-campus job, I was retired by a professor from another university who wished to lift the quality of his team's writing to get them published in better quality and peer-reviewed journals. I'll add now that it was a School of Nursing and Midwifery, because I don't think that publishing has ever been their strong suit, because they're too busy doing everything else. So I then became their editor mentor and still do the odd paper, but now my time is taken up with editing and writing Florio Living magazine. Dr. Peter Allcroft has a copy if anyone wants to have a look. Now, living with a death sentence. Okay, the title is really just to grab your attention because each of us lives with a death sentence, so what's the big deal? However, for me, the death part isn't the problem. It's the life part that strikes fear into my heart. Already I've watched on as the person I once was has slowly, and these days not so slowly, fallen away. Once I never walked upstairs, I ran up two at a time. Looking back, I wonder why, but I think it was just because I could. I've always tested myself against myself. However, now I can barely stand, and the thought of negotiating even a 5-centimetre slope fills me with terror, especially if I'm going down. Once I sang opera, not particularly well, but I really enjoyed it and loved the catharsis of it. I'm not for one moment assuming that anyone else within earshot shared my feelings of cathartic well-being, especially during a quartet where I would sing all 4 parts. Note, I always sang to recordings of my favourite singers, which made me sound quite good, but I always had them turned up quite high, so that when my voice mingled with theirs, to my ear it sounded all me. The point of this being is that now I can't sing a note. Nothing comes out the way I want it to, unless I'm going for intermittent squawks. And forget tapping the feet to a beat. Even clapping along to flamenco is out of the question. My body and I are at odds with one another. I go one way and my body just does its own thing, and not very well. Now the same thing is beginning to happen with my mouth. Fortunately, it's still connected in a way, because it has its ups and downs of still being connected to my brain, except that my brain works at 45 RPM and my mouth at 33 RPM. At best, it slows my speech. At worst, my brain has moved on, so my mouth may utter the beginning of one word and, perhaps in an attempt to catch up, finish the word with an amalgam of the next few words already transmitted from my brain. I am appalled. I used to be so articulate and eloquent. Now, especially if I'm tired, I sound as though I've had a few too many. I've heard somebody else mention this. My left hand is off with the fairies now, and there are signs that my right hand is about to follow. You can tell when parts of your body are about to part company with you. They start flickering like a fluorescent tube on the way out. Having always been an extremely independent and lively person, I'm now reduced to a life of sedentary dependence. I no longer drive. Maybe I could, but since I can't get into or out of the car unaided or onto my three-wheeled travel scoot without having it lifted from the car boot, brought to me where I need help to step into it, it sort of misses the whole point of driving somewhere to do my own thing. And just what is my own thing? It's certainly not what it used to be. My greatest joy used to be to run into the sea and plunge in, no matter how bracing, a bit like the ice water challenge. Being immersed in an ocean is the most liberating thing I can think of. All cares melt away. Everything else but the sea itself fades into insignificance. I can live without the singing, tapping and clapping, but life without immersion in the sea is a much sadder prospect. However, the aspect of this disease that most strikes terror into my heart comes when I see Stephen Hawking and realise that I, too, could eventually become as dependent as he is. I know he's happy, but I can't imagine that I would be. My hope is that euthanasia becomes legal in this country so that those who have no desire to live on regardless of the situation in which they find themselves can have a choice. But who knows, when the time comes, I may wish to go down the Hawking path. But I hope to be given the right to choose without having to take a grueling suicide tourism flight to Switzerland or Holland when I'm already out of my comfort zone just flying to another state. On that note, I'd like to see Dr. Philip Nitschke perceived as a hero, not the villain so often depicted by the media. He's merely a man who assists people out of a life they can no longer endure by advising them on clean, measured doses of medication that will give them and their loved ones a way out of a distressing situation. If people suicide alone out of desperation, it could not only go very wrong and quite messy, but it places undue stress on family and friends. Well, so far I don't seem to have addressed the brief of together participation, partnerships and progress, so here goes. I notice everyone's looking quite depressed. My ideal scenario within which to attain all this togetherness, partnership and progression would be a neurological rehabilitation suite attached to a largest facility. My voice is starting to get a bit... a neurological rehabilitation suite attached to a fairly largest facility wherein specialist nurses, physios, social workers, OTs, speech pathologists, psychologists, social workers, and even massage therapists could all be based, not necessarily all the time, but regularly, so that a person with MND or some other neurological dysfunction could go to be seen by one or more of the professionals for treatment or advice or whatever, with computerized records central and available to all other providers in the suite. These suites should be attached to a facility large enough to be able to supply the rooms, facilities, and hopefully a pool for exercise. They should probably be in each state and ideally have some beds available if the need arises for hospitalisation or even just a break. This may sound familiar to some of them. For example, in South Australia, where I come from, there is a day rehab centre attached to the Door Park Repatriation Centre, where I was lucky enough to spend 2 or 3 hours a week for 6 weeks. But once this time had elapsed, so did my entitlement to attend the facility. It's such a pity because they were so good, and I do so miss the easily accessible low chlorine pool. One of the main issues for MND patients, as I see it, is the need for movement, whether active and in water or passive massage. For me, given that we're all different, this is far more effective for pain relief than chemical pain relievers. At the end of my paper, I've allowed time for questions as was requested, but I'd like this to be a two-way street because I have some questions that I'd like answered by anyone who may have an answer or who would just like to initiate discussion. I've chosen this venue for my questions since it's rare to find such a broad mix of practitioners all working in this fairly narrow field in one place. My questions for you are, and I hope somebody can answer these, given that glutamate clumps are a major player in MND, does ingested glutamate play any part in worsening the symptoms? And if so, would a diet low in glutamate slow the progression or even ease the symptoms? Why does MND stand for motor neurone disease when it doesn't fit the criteria of a disease? Couldn't it be changed to MND, motor neurone disorder or dysfunction, which would be both be more accurate descriptors without implying contagion? I feel if I say I have motor neurone disease that people shrink away as though they might catch it. Do over-the-counter supplements help, or are they just a waste of money? For example, I take vitamin B in the hope of endowing myself with better nerve health, CoQ10 because it's said to be such an amazing antioxidant, fish oil for cold prevention and arthritis ease, and magnesium. These are things in addition to prescribed things, and magnesium to minimise the ever-present muscle cramping. If these supplements are helpful and not just a waste of money, what would be the most effective dose of each? And are there other supplements that could be effective? Are there other things that a person with MND could be doing to slow progression, retain as much movement as possible for as long as possible, or even just diminish pain? Given that the designated carer is a key element in the MND patient's quality of life, just what is available for better survival of the carer and consequently the MND patient? Now, we've had papers that have covered that, and I think very well. I have never been a carer, but I know 2 women who have been full-time carers for their now deceased husbands. Neither of them died of MND, but stroke and things like that. What were once very loving and passionate relationships slowly descended into resentment and animosity as things got more difficult with the worsening condition and with the increasing dependence of those cared for. I have noticed a building resentment in my own situation. Sometimes it can even become quite volatile and a little scary. I think this would be very common and understandable response to being thrown into the role of full-time carer after having spent decades anticipating a recreation-filled, pleasurable retirement. And my own situation will likely worsen along with my condition. Not a good scene for either the carer or the cared for. There must be a way to ameliorate this almost inevitable spiral, but I can't think of any resolution. I'd like to think that there is a solution to what must be a common dilemma. Note, I was pleased to see that some of the papers are central to the carer. Naturally, I can't contribute to the progress aspect of this conference's theme, but I would like to know more about upcoming progress in technology and also the cognitive changes referred to in this portion of the progress component. The end. Time for Q&A. Have we got time for...
Thank you. We've got time for perhaps one question of Leonie.
One answer for Leonie?
Lots of questions.
Oh dear, I must have covered everything so adequately.
But I'm sure you will have provoked a lot of
Yes.
thought and perhaps a lot of conversation. Oh, here we are. Someone, Peter.
Leonie and I do know each other, so that's my disclaimer. I did ask her, was she going to terrorise us and challenge us, and she has done that indeed. I don't have the answers, unfortunately. On the supplements, it's difficult. We like to base ourselves on evidence-based medicine, scientific trials which are edited and contributed to.
Yes.
Testimonials, unfortunately, don't stack up for us.
Well, nobody hangs around long enough.
So I don't have the answers. I will take on with Philip Nitschke, who I have met.
Oh.
And he's a clever man, but he is a maverick. And
Yes,
sometimes I think
yes.
Philip does himself a disservice.
Yes. Well, you have to be a little bit out there to do what he's doing against so much opposition.
What I will say, and you highlighted, is that suicide has a ripple effect.
Yes.
And so what I really do want to highlight is that good palliative care involvement from your community, and being down the beautiful Fleurieu Peninsula, there are good palliative care services with nurses who visit. And it's fascinating when you look at the data. Oregon, it is legalised for physician-assisted suicide, and it is rarely taken up.
But it's nice to know that it's there.
Rarely taken up. And where euthanasia is highlighted is often in areas where there's less palliative care support. So my promise to you and all patients is that good palliative care involvement helps to minimise the stress to smooth the road it comes. We can't flatten it completely.
No, no.
I hope that helps a little.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you to Leonie once again.
And I hope I didn't depress anybody.
I'm sure you didn't, not with your lovely smile.